And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be looking at hot takes from this YouTuber. I'm sure you guys know him. He's JxmyHighroller. He's one of the more popular basketball YouTubers that's out there, where he posts videos like time and time again, posting his opinions, posting ridiculous stats, this, that, and the other. And he just recently posted a video where he gives his own hot takes. Now, usually he's more accustomed to looking at hot takes and analyzing them as opposed to him like giving his own hot takes. So this is the first time where he is sort of giving hot takes, and I'm just going to give like my overall opinions on this, whether I agree with it, whether I don't agree with it, this, that, and the other, and all of that. So first hot take he has is that Tim Duncan is slightly overrated. So in the video, I'm not going to like say everything that happens in the video, but in the video he mainly highlights how Tim Duncan, throughout his retirement, has slowly but surely creeped up into top 5 or top 3 rankings. Like, if you ask and if you look at like social media comments and this, that, and the other, a lot of people will say and like they'll defend Tim Duncan as like Tim Duncan is like he's the big fundamental best power forward of all time, and all of that is true, but is he top 5? I don't think so. And a lot of people like I somewhat agree with this take. Like I somewhat agree with this take. I do think that Tim Duncan has become slightly overrated by the media, simply because of his accolades and his accomplishments. And when you look at his accolades and his accomplishments, it makes sense, and it sounds like egregious to say that like he's overrated, because he is a 5-time champion, he is a 15-time All-Star, he's made the All-Defensive team several times, and he's won the MVP as well as Finals MVP a couple of times. So really, like, his accolades, like, when you look at them, they look like top 5 player, especially when you consider how he was one shot away from going 6-0 in the finals, which was the record that a lot of basketball players tried to set, because Michael Jordan set that 6-0 finals record standard. And like, obviously when you look at that, like, it would make sense, but you also have to, you can't just take part of the context. You have to take the context entirely as it is. And Tim Duncan, when he was on the Spurs, was he ever talked about while being on the Spurs? Like, you never heard Tim Duncan in the Spurs. You always heard the Spurs. The Spurs were a ridiculously good franchise, and they had a winning culture around the team. They had a great offensive system as well under Pop, and those were, along with the Hall of Famers that they had on the roster, that was a big reason as to why they had as much success as they did. And it wasn't just primarily Tim Duncan, it was the rest of the squad that was doing not all of the work, because Tim Duncan, he did his role to the best of his ability, and he was by far their best player. But as a team and as the system, they all played within the system. Like, they had that understanding there was no I in team. And with that in mind, I think it's a little bit unfair to have him in the top 5 when you take all of that into account. Because other power forwards like Dirk and Kevin Garnett, they never had the benefit of playing within that system. I'm not saying that Tim Duncan is a system player, but throughout his career, he's found his success through the Spurs and their system. And he's played with countless Hall of Famers. He's played with David Robinson. He's played with Tony Parker. He's played with Manu Ginobili. He's played with Kawhi Leonard. Sometimes all at the same time he played with them. And obviously, with a squad like that, and with the system that they were running, it makes sense that they were going to find success. And it wasn't like he was carrying the team. The team was carrying itself. And I feel like now, with where the Spurs are now under Popovich, and how they've been one of the worst teams in the league since Tim Duncan and like all those other players they left, it's sort of like flipping the script a little bit And a lot of people now are sort of thinking, Tim Duncan must have been that guy, because since he retired, the Spurs haven't been nearly as good. And it's like it's putting that perspective on it. But back then, if you said that Tim Duncan was better than Shaq, you were crazy. If you said he was better than Kobe, you were out of your mind. And if you said he was better than Kareem, you need to go into a mental institution. Like, that was back then. And now he's slowly just creeping up. And like I get JxmyHighroller's take on this, and I somewhat agree with it. So the next hot take he has is LeBron makes situations worse. And I'll elaborate on exactly like what that is. Now, he mainly highlighted his time with the Miami Heat. Like, he doesn't understand why he left the Miami Heat in 2014. He says that, well, like, it's sort of like, it's not really obvious, but when you think about it, it sort of is obvious. So D. Wade was getting a little bit older. The Cavaliers had the cap space, and they also had a better, much younger guard in Kyrie Irving at the time. I'm not saying that Kyrie was better than D. Wade, but at the time, Kyrie was a better guard to have than D. Wade. And he decided to go, well, that's the thought process. He decided to go over there because that seemed like a better opportunity for him. But when you look at the Heat now and what they've been doing, like, as a team, you sort of have to wonder, like, what would happen if LeBron had stayed? Maybe his career would have been better, or maybe it would have panned out a little bit different. But here's my take on that. I don't think that LeBron would nearly get as much respect as he does now if he didn't win a championship in Cleveland. And, like, if he would have stayed on Miami, everyone was just going to remember him as, like, he would have literally just been Kevin Durant, if anything. Like, people would have remembered him for only winning, like, with that ridiculous Miami team, and they wouldn't remember him for, like, redeeming himself and this, that, and the other. So him going back to Cleveland, it sort of altered his it would alter his legacy, because he would ultimately bring the championship that was sort of promised when drafting him. And without that, I don't think, and without beating the Warriors after coming back from a 3-1 lead, I don't think that LeBron's legacy would have been any better. It might have even been worse, honestly. But that's a completely different conversation. He also highlighted how when he thought the Cavs weren't good enough in 2000 and in the 2017-18 season, 2017-18 season, he didn't really think that the Cavs were a good enough roster. So what he did was he decided to blow up that roster entirely and just start from scratch, essentially. Like, that was his thought process in the 2018 season, to just start from scratch in the middle of the season. And right after that, he decides to leave just to go to the Lakers. And I don't really know how I feel about that. Like, because when I think about it, it's like that Cleveland team, like, before he made the changes, it was full of older players that weren't that good. They were past their prime. But it was full of old players that were good, but it wasn't full of enough role players. And I think LeBron sort of realized that going into the postseason, and that's why he decided to blow up the roster and only keep a few and add a little bit, and add a few players, because there wasn't enough role players for him to be able to do what he did. And I mean, it ultimately led to him going to the finals. So obviously, like, off of, like, his back and off of the will of his offense. But I don't really look at it as LeBron trying to just, he destroys the team and then he immediately leaves, because that's what he's sort of trying to portray it as, where, like, he completely blew up the roster, made a whole new roster, and then ditched that roster the next year to go to the Lakers. And then he brings up the championship with LeBron when he won in 2020. Instead of running it back with the same team, the Lakers decide to implode the lineup and create a whole new team. And he says that he obviously, like, it's known, these type of decisions, they don't happen without LeBron's okay. But you also have to understand that LeBron isn't the one making these moves. This is the organization giving suggestions to him and him giving them the okay. The organization could say no for all they care. But he's making it seem like LeBron is just chasing. And I think that's just a bad portrayal, because when LeBron waited for the organization to do its job in his first stint in Cleveland, it didn't work out. So his response to that is just, fine, I'll do it myself. And that's what he's been doing the rest of his career. Like, you can't really fault him at that just because he just like moves, it seems that he moves on to the next shiny thing. He wants to win. And the organization, like, as history has shown, is not going to give it to him. So he has to find it himself. And that's what I see it as. I don't really see it as him leaving the team and trying to go win somewhere else, just abandoning them completely. Like, he left for a reason. That's my thought process behind it. And that decision to blow up the entire roster and bring in Russ, how was anybody supposed to know that Russ's production was going to fall off a cliff? How was anybody supposed to know that? Like, everyone was saying, like, okay, this is not a good fit. But in reality, it wasn't a good fit because the rotations weren't there. The rotations, like, for the team and the starting lineups, they just weren't there, and they did not help Russ. Like, it could have worked. It's just, it didn't. And part of that is because of how bad Russ really was. Like, a lot of people don't understand, like, just the problems that Russ brings, and they only see, like, the good that he brings in his stat hunting. But in reality, that stat hunting, it doesn't lead to wins. And I knew that was going to be a problem with the Lakers because Russ was going to be busy stat hunting when in reality the rest of the team is expecting him to try to play to win. And it wasn't going to work, not because it was a bad system, but because it was Westbrook that they got. Like, I'm not a big fan of Westbrook simply because I'm a big fan of him. I'm not a big fan of his fans. I'm gonna redirect that statement. I'm not a big fan of the fans of Westbrook. I do like Westbrook, and I think he's a phenomenal athlete and he's a great player. But his fans, they give him too much credit where I feel like they don't need to give him that much credit. And it's like, with the way he plays, it was only going to hurt that Lakers team because he constantly needs the ball in his hands to even be effective. And if he doesn't have the ball in his hands, he's not effective. On top of that, when he has the ball in his hands, he's turnover prone, and he's also prone to taking a bunch of bad shots, especially late in the fourth quarter where he just can't help but just pull up a three for whatever reason. I don't understand what it is. He does this like once in a blue moon every single time in the fourth quarter. He just walks down the court, whoever's in his face, doesn't matter, he just throws the ball up. I don't understand why he does that, but he does that. And he has two modes. It's like there's like two things that make him stand out. His motor and his hustle. He never stops playing hard on offense, and it could be fun for a while, except for when you realize that opponents want him to take every single shot because he cannot shoot. And then once we get rid of the scoring option, he's not really that good of a facilitator either. Like, he gets a lot of assists, but those cancel out when you take into account his turnovers, because it's like, sure, he's getting assists, but at the same time, he's just giving the ball back to the other team at the same amount of times that he's passing the ball to his own team. He's a good defensive rebound, but his rebounding totals are heavily inflated due to cherry-pick defensive rebounds. Like, he's a great rebounder for a guard, but since the rest of the teams, they run back on defense, that's a free defensive rebound for him. And, like, his triple-doubles, they just don't bring value. And the play style that he has, it's not winning basketball, unless it's coming off the bench when it's for the Clippers, where he can do whatever, like, where he can have the ball with that bench. And it's like, it wasn't going to work simply because it was Russ. If it was any other star, it probably would have worked. And then the last hot take, because we are running out of time, is that the corner shot is not the easiest shot to hit in basketball. So his thought process behind this is because The corner shot is exclusively for three-point shooters. 9 times out of 10, that is where the shooter is going to stand. He is going to stand in the corner, and his job is to wait until the help defense comes down and leaves him wide open, and then he knocks down the shot. That's the shot that every single offense looks for in the league now. And since that shot is reserved to the best of three-point shooters, it makes sense how the average three-point percentage in the corner is going to be higher than the average three-point percentage at the top of the key. Another point he brings up is that at the top of the key, that's where a lot of the best players on the team operate. They might not be the best shooters on the team, but they're the best players on the team. And so if the shot is open, 9 times out of 10, they're going to take it. So it makes sense how the percentage is lower because a lot of players that aren't really considered shooters are taking shots from out there. And the other thought process that he brought up is like just overall like experience and his experience on playing basketball. Like when you look at the corner and when you stand in the corner, at least like, because I can agree with him on this one. When you stand in the corner and you look at the hoop, it just looks more difficult to shoot from there than you would if you were standing from top of the key, because you have a much better perception of like the backboard and like where you have to like just aim the ball at in order to hit the shot. In the corner, it's much more difficult to do that, and that's why it's usually reserved to some of the best shooters in the NBA. And it makes sense. Like, obviously, I think numerically, I think that's the easiest shot because it is the closest three-point shot on the entire court. And when you practice it enough, it's like you're going to eventually hit a lot of those shots, especially like when you practice it religiously, like how a lot of these corner shooters practice it. So I feel like with all the repetition, the NBA has made it an easy shot. But in reality, like if you were to just take a shot from there, it's not an easy shot to hit. So I'm sort of in the mid-tier of that. I think it's when you practice, it's an easy shot to hit. But when you don't practice, it's not going to be an easy shot to hit. Because when you think about it, in the corner, like 9 times out of 10, that's literally the same shot every single time. And so you just have to remember that same motion where you made the shot, and you're going to make the other one when you step in for that corner three. So it's repetition, and it's the same shot that you're going to be accustomed to shooting every single time. Whereas supposed to if you're at the top of the key, you could be farther back from the three-point line. You could be closer to the three-point line. You could be more on the left. You could be more on the right. You could be off balance and things of that nature, which is another thing that I didn't bring up. The fact that a lot of these corner shots, they aren't off the dribble, and a lot of the shots at the top of the key, they are off the dribble, and they are mostly contested shots, which is why the three-point percentage at the top of the key is much lower than the three-point percentage in the corner, because in the corner, you're giving it to a shooter who is already set, ready to shoot, and who's most likely wide open. And all of these factors contribute to better three-point shooting percentages. So it makes sense, but I'm still sort of on that like mid-tier where it's like I think it's the easy shot, but I understand why other people might not think it's an easy shot. But with that, that is the end of the podcast, and that is the end of the fourth segment. So thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as always, please remember to use the link in the description and the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment to get your comments recognized. The link is GSMCPodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCPodcast.net. And that does it for the show today. I am your host, Nelson. Thank you guys once again. And as always, take care.
Let's go. I I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.